This is very intimidating to write about. This film has been with me since I was 12 years old, and it made such a powerful impression on me then, it still does, and I want to be able to articulate it all sufficiently. Check out a video in the description by YouTuber Horror Gang if you'd like to learn more about the film's general context, as well as another video there discussing the 2008 remake, which I refuse to do. I'll write this piece on the assumption that one has seen The Day the Earth Stood Still, the 1951 classic, and so maybe preferably do so before embarking upon this. View the linked video to learn more without having the film dissected as such. So I think in some ways the Day of Judgment is prophesied in Abrahamic religions, most popularly and prominently via Christianity in the English-speaking world, and the first contact, presumably visitation to Earth, of alien life, as optimistically or fearfully theorized by scientific enthusiasts and or weird alternative lifestyle New Agers. These two things are very similar. In fact, one almost stems from the entrenchment of the other in the English-speaking nations. Much is made of Klaatu being analogous to Jesus Christ, and this is especially apt as Klaatu and Gort's visit to Earth functions as the biblical judgment, more or less, and regardless of whether a Christian metaphor was intended by screenwriter Edmund H. North, although it apparently was, the realistic or quasi-realistic scenario of extraterrestrial visitors, and if they could, they are insurmountably more technologically advanced than humankind, and so may as well be divine, it may as well be the judgment of our otherworldly creator. The metaphor becomes an obvious, intuitive one, and North inserts it very tastefully and appropriately. There is almost no reason not to, as it so inevitably resembles the prophesied second coming of Christ, as far as the legends had foretold it. I do not know whether this was the intent of author Harry Bates, who penned the 1940 short story Farewell to the Master, which inspired the film production, although again, it is irrelevant, because a comparison, an analogy, a striking similarity, is inevitable. Of course, Edmund H. North inserted narrative clues. The death and resurrection was actually inspired from the original short story, but much of it is relatively somewhat subtle. Klaatu's Earth pseudonym is Carpenter, John Carpenter, initials JC. His kinship and understanding of a child's perspective is not dissimilar to Christ, nor is his friendship and kindness toward Patricia Neal's Helen Benson, a single mother, a potential stigma not unlike perhaps Mary Magdalene's role in the Gospels. He sends into the sky with a message to love each other and to have faith in his power. You sometimes wonder, I certainly did, what will it be like when the world ends? If one is in the afterlife, in heaven let's say, as Christian upbringing can suggest, they might still be affected by the events occurring in the Book of Revelation's apocalyptic vision. A more friendly, a realistic, fun way of imagining that is, what will it be like the day the UFOs finally land? Independence Day asked the question in 1996, and it wasn't very interesting or well executed. An optimistic hope might be that they come in peace. Klaatu does. He requests, vaguely, demands, almost sternly, that humanity cease their proliferation of nuclear weapons and strive for global peace. Their warmongering ways will not be welcome among the interplanetary community. The Day the Earth Stood Still satiates a great base curiosity in this respect, but more profoundly, it displays Klaatu's experience of, and natural curiosity for, our little blue home. There is a joy in watching how Klaatu hides himself amongst the regular people of Washington, D.C. The stretch of the film between his arrival at the boarding home and his visit to Professor Barnhart is one of the most joyous ever captured and screened. Then we experience something which this film, and possibly via its helming from former editor Robert Wise, does exceptionally, chillingly well. These stretches of silence with no dialogue, as several shots and a haunting score. We'll discuss the genius Herman a bit later, and the haunting score plays over the images. Klaatu's visit to the UFO, as he uses a flashlight, the child Bobby's flashlight, to communicate with Gort, has Gort incapacitate the two soldiers on guard duty, and then as we see the ship's interior for the first time, Klaatu with a cold, serious look on his face, totally distinct from how he was interacting with his fellow residents at the boarding house. This sequence is extraordinary, a superb stretch of film not unlike Norman Bates hiding away the remains of Marion Crane and her vehicle in Alfred Hitchcock's 1960, also a cinematic masterpiece, Psycho. But my favourite segment of the film occurs later. Not very long after a famous scene, wherein Klaatu tells Helen Benson that if something were to happen to him, it has to be up to her to settle a potentially rampaging, utterly unstoppable Gort. He informs her that he is to speak the words to Gort, Klaatu Barada Nikto. Klaatu Barada Nikto. Sadly, Klaatu is shot by pursuing officers, and Helen makes her way to the side of the spaceship and of Gort. We, the audience, have the privilege of arriving at this site before Helen has. We observe as Gort eliminates his encased prison of seemingly unbreakable chemical/material property, and he disintegrates the two soldiers on guard at the site. Helen arrives very shortly after this, goes to approach Gort, and finds him just as this titanic robotic guardian is fully broken free of its attempted encasement. Gort approaches Helen. She, in a rush to terror, backs away into a corner, nowhere to outrun the incoming extraterrestrial android Behemoth. It becomes a scene not unlike the monster movies of old, Universal Studios, and which inspired so many 1950s American sci-fi horror B-movies, far more than any science fiction novels ever could, at this time for better or worse. Some may laugh at the very modest spectacle that is Gort trampling over the fold-out chairs in front of the landed spaceship, and this is to be permitted. But then, she swallows her fear. We see bravery enter her eyes, determination. This is no time to be a damsel in distress. She had her scream, and it will be her last, and not her last utterance either, though it will be the final scream. She single-handedly saves all life on Earth. Gort. Klaatu Barada Nikto. It still intends to disintegrate her. Gort. Klaatu Barada Nikto. It understands the command. Down comes its visor. No disintegration here. And then our damsel in distress moment transforms into something even more profound and tremendously powerful, although it still resembles one. Gort carries Helen into the spaceship, intending to keep her out of harm's way until he can return Klaatu to life so he can speak with her. At this moment, she has lost her faith in humanity. Her love interest was a vile bully who sold Klaatu out, and is an infamously poor performance too. And they shot this peaceful individual dead, who had been so kind and generous to her young son. Gort carries her away. You will be safe from their madness. Stay here for now. We will not let anything hurt you. Patricia Neal's performance is unsung in this film, although she seems to have been a celebrated actress in her lifetime. I might go so far as to say that it is one of my favourite film performances of all time. The film is initially about Klaatu, but then it becomes a film about Helen Benson, the last hope for humanity, literally and spiritually. It is Helen which informs Klaatu's eventual faith in humanity. His cold, unforgiving speech at the film's close, clearly bitter at his former death and how long he might still live, it is totally uncertain, and yet he reserves a sincere smile, breaking his pain, at the warm gaze of Helen. If there was a hope we have, our species' potential realized, it is Helen's perseverance, love for her son, her lack of fear for the potential spaceman, her tolerance of others' potential failings, and her reliable, selfless bravery in going about the resurrection of Klaatu himself. And meanwhile, in terms of non-actors, props, VFX, Gort is one of the finest contributions to cinema of all time. I'm in love with the idea of that Gort, just being a humanoid metal casing, possesses within him laser beams so powerful, external armor completely impenetrable or even stainable, to make him the most powerful weapon ever devised in the history of fiction, almost. I mean, one would have to blow up the spaceship, or planet, whip out the Death Star, that a Gort robot is on, and just have him float through the vast never-ending vacuum of space forever and ever. I love that so much. I love in old Doctor Who, for example, how all the Daleks needed to be the greatest threat in the universe is that all-powerful laser beam. Sure, they're clever and all, but that laser beam was so powerful that they didn't even need to be designed for stairs, or so Davros felt, or whichever canon they used pre-1975. Gort is so much of this film's power. His presence is the stuff of legend. He makes those two silent stretches I referred to. He is the focus of both of them. And it is as though the silent film era itself has been resurrected and transcended, superseded by this combination of potential dialogue and a recorded, set and intended, piece of glorious musical composition. In this case, Bernard Herrmann's score, arguably, plausibly, one of the 5 most important in film history up to that point, and one of the 5 most important possibly even to this day. And in music history, not just film history. Is there electronic music prior to Herrmann's score? All music nerds / snobs out there? I need to know. Apparently it predates some of Stockhausen's experiments. Is this something that music people would be willing to admit, that the film medium facilitated the development, the progression of electronic music as we know it? Probably not willing to, no. Why would they? Nah. The Day the Earth Stood Still is a film which could have been a magnificent Murnau Silent, or an Orson Welles take on the 1950s sci-fi futurist yarn. It only lacks the specific cinematographic ambition, the post-expressionism which Greg Toland, Stanley Cortez, or even a John Russell, who shot this same year's highly gothic The Man from Planet X, brought photographically to a Welles production, because instead cinematographer Leo Tova commands a quasi-documentary, flat and vivid, pronounced yet, as is, kind of realism to the aesthetic. The Day the Earth Stood Still is one of the most fundamentally valid, true to the film form, both orthodox in its construction and yet timeless in its grace. A film for all time, to be appreciated by all except heathens, I guess. No, I don't truly mean that, necessarily, although if the message of this film cannot be understood by succeeding generations to the ones alive today and now, if they cannot appreciate this picture as a masterpiece, as one of the most profound works of film art, well, even if you don't want to consider it one of the top pieces of profound film art, if you can't find any appreciation for the film whatsoever, we are doomed, and maybe we deserve to be. Thanks all. Have a wonderful day, night, wherever you are, however you are. I hope you are well, all of you.